Welcome back to the Paranormal State, Washington, and UFO UAP. With Makāula Nakae, a lifelong experiencer and ET contactee since 1990. Today's episode, 06 Men in Black. In our previous episode, we explored how Kenneth Arnold's investigation into the Maury Island debris drew him into a dark web of surveillance and intimidation. In late July 1947, while staying at the Winthrop Hotel in Tacoma, Arnold and fellow pilot Emil J. Smith received a series of late-night anonymous phone calls. The callers demonstrated an uncanny real-time awareness of their movements, warning them in chilling detail to drop the investigation immediately. They were told that continuing to collect, discuss, or transport the Maury Island metal slag would bring severe personal and professional consequences. The psychological pressure quickly spilled out onto the open road. As soon as the men pulled away from the hotel to deliver their remaining metal fragments to military intelligence at McCord Field, they realized they were being tailed. A sleek, late-model black Buick sedan locked onto their bumper. No matter how they altered their speed, changed lanes, or navigated the Tacoma streets, the anonymous vehicle maintained a rigid, menacing distance, mirroring every single turn. It was a textbook exercise in intimidation, a silent, visible reminder that they were entirely exposed and under constant watch. Though they successfully delivered the fragments, the haunting presence of that car left an indelible psychological mark. The threat soon escalated from psychological warfare to an explicit attempt on Arnold's life. Following their meetings in Washington, Arnold boarded his private plane at the airport in Pendleton, Oregon, to fly back home to Idaho. As a meticulous, safety-obsessed pilot with thousands of hours in the cockpit, Arnold always conducted rigorous pre-flight inspections. Yet, shortly after takeoff, as he gained altitude, his engine suddenly sputtered, coughed, and violently died. Deprived of power, Arnold was forced into a split-second emergency maneuver, expertly gliding his aircraft back down to a tense, low-altitude emergency landing. Once safely on the tarmac, Arnold popped the cowling to inspect the engine. To his absolute shock, he discovered that his fuel shutoff valve had been deliberately manipulated and turned off. This was no mechanical failure or structural defect. It was an act of deliberate sabotage. Because Arnold kept his plane secured, the tampering could only have been executed by someone with professional access to the airfield and the aircraft while it was parked, proving that the unseen forces tracking him possessed the reach and audacity to compromise his equipment. It was out of these chilling encounters with silent watchers, threatening phone calls, and targeted sabotage that the legendary Men in Black MIB mythos truly began to roll. The archetype of the Men in Black MIB occupies a unique space at the intersection of high strangeness folklore, Cold War paranoia, and Hollywood pop culture. While modern audiences instantly recognize the concept through blockbuster science fiction comedies and comic book franchises, the true historical roots of the MIB trace directly back to the Pacific Northwest during the explosive summer of UFO activity in 1947. Long before Hollywood dressed agents in sleek black suits to police extraterrestrial immigration, the legend was born out of the controversial Maury Island incident in Puget Sound, Washington on June 21, 1947, just days before Kenneth Arnold's historic sighting near Mount Rainier. According to mariner Harold Dahl, while patrolling the waters near Maury Island, he and his crew witnessed 6 donut-shaped craft. One of the objects allegedly malfunctioned, showering the boat with heavy metallic debris that broke a window, killed the family dog, and injured Dahl's son. The day after the sighting, Dahl claimed he was approached by a silent stranger wearing a crisp, dark black suit. The man escorted Dahl to a local breakfast diner and proceeded to detail the exact events of the Maury Island sighting with terrifying precision, even though Dahl had told no one. The man issued a stark warning: keep silent about the incident or else. This chilling encounter established the foundational template for the MIB archetype, ominous figures arriving out of nowhere to suppress witnesses of the extraordinary. While the Maury Island episode planted the seeds, ufologist and publisher Gray Barker cemented the Men in Black into the bedrock of paranormal lore through his 1956 book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. Barker popularized the accounts of Albert Bender, a prominent UFO researcher from Connecticut who in 1953 claimed he was silenced by three mysterious men in black suits. Bender described these figures with gothic, almost supernatural intensity. They typically moved in groups of 2 or 3. They wore identical dark suits, Homburg-style hats, and sunglasses, blending the aesthetic of 1950s government G-men with an eerie, uniform sterility. According to Bender's later writings, Flying Saucers and the Three Men, these entities possessed burning, flashlight-like eyes that seemed to pierce his soul, and they exerted a debilitating psychological and physical pressure on anyone attempting to expose UFO truths. Over the decades, the description of the men in black shifted dramatically within paranormal subculture. Early researchers viewed the MIB as rogue intelligence operatives, CIA spooks, or a secret wing of the military-industrial complex, tasked with intimidating witnesses and confiscating physical evidence such as photos or metal shards. As tales evolved, ufologists noted that MIB encounters defied normal human behavior. Witnesses reported that these men drove antiquated, mint-condition cars that vanished into thin air, lacked basic knowledge of common human customs, like eating or using modern currency, and exhibited an uncanny, robotic demeanor. This led to the hypothesis that the MIB might not be human at all, but rather psychic projections, synthetic biological entities, or interdimensional custodians sent to maintain consensus reality. From the serious investigations sealed in historical FBI files to the vibrant annual Men in Black birthday bash celebrating Washington State's rich UFO heritage, the MIB remain the ultimate shadow figures of ufology. They represent humanity's deep-seated anxiety that powerful hidden forces are actively policing the boundary between our everyday world and the terrifying vastness of the cosmos. The classic 20th century phenomenon of the Men in Black. MIB, mysterious, suit-wearing figures showing up at a witness's doorstep to intimidate them into silence after a UFO sighting, has largely faded from the cultural forefront. But the underlying archetype hasn't entirely disappeared. In the era of modern UAP transparency, congressional whistleblowers, and Pentagon hearings, the premise of the traditional MIB has flipped. Back in the 1950s through the 1990s, ufology operated on a heavy concealment model. If you saw something, shadowy agents would allegedly show up to threaten you. Today, with military pilots openly filing reports through official channels like AARO and government task forces encouraging data collection, the men in dark suits showing up to confiscate your camera roll belongs more to folklore than current reality. Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones's 1997 blockbuster comedy Men in Black and its sequels completely mainstreamed and satirized the trope. Once a concept becomes a major pop culture comedy franchise, it becomes very difficult for people to take real-world reports of men in black suits seriously. If someone claims today that they were visited by men in black, it instantly invites skepticism or pop culture jokes, rather than deep societal panic. How the MIB manifests today, digital and psychological. While physical visits from ominous men in vintage suits are practically non-existent now, modern high strangeness circles and internet forums, like Reddit's or UFOs, or paranormal spaces, still feature modern equivalents. Instead of a creepy man knocking on a front door, contemporary whistleblowers are independent researchers who claim to leak sensitive data more often report digital anomalies, such as targeted cyber harassment, mysterious account lockouts, sudden social media shadow banning, or subtle online intimidation. Paranormal researchers note that modern accounts of anomalous entities, often drawing from John Keel's theories, suggest these phenomena project whatever form is necessary to unnerve a witness. Just as 1950s witnesses saw men in matching retro suits driving outdated black sedans, modern anomalous encounters adapt to contemporary fears, blending elements of corporate surveillance, tech tracking, or psychological disorientation. Ultimately, while the classic mid-century MIB trope is a relic of a bygone era of Cold War paranoia and early ufology, the core human anxiety of being watched or silenced by unseen forces continues to evolve right alongside modern technology. The legend of the Men in Black, MIB, mysterious operatives in dark suits who silence witnesses of anomalous phenomena, did not emerge in a vacuum. From pulp science fiction magazines of the 1940s to Hollywood blockbusters in the 1990s, The MIB archetype has saturated modern media. When an individual becomes deeply immersed in high strangeness phenomena, the presence of these pre-existing cultural templates can profoundly alter psychological processing. Understanding how media preconception interacts with human neurology to craft paranoia requires examining both the cognitive mechanics of belief and the rigorous framework scientists use to distinguish genuine, extraordinary experiences from neurologically manifested illusions. Human memory and perception are not passive recording devices. They are active predictive systems. When a person is exposed to intense emotional stress, anomalous events such as a UFO sighting or deep sense of isolation, the brain desperately searches for a narrative framework to make sense of the chaos. Psychologists note that when people absorb stories, movies, or urban legends, the specific source of that information often fades from conscious memory, while the emotional core remains cryptomnesia. If an individual encounters a stressful, ambiguous situation, such as being followed on a highway, receiving an unusual phone call, or experiencing a minor car trouble, their brain scans its internal library for an explanation. Because the MIB mythos is deeply embedded in the cultural ether, the brain unconsciously pulls that pre-formatted template forward. It superimposes the Men in Black narrative onto ordinary, ambiguous life events, transforming a random tailgating car into a sinister government surveillance operation. The human brain is an evolutionary survival engine built for pattern recognition, apophenia. When a person holds a preconceived notion that they are being targeted by shadowy government agents, confirmation bias takes over, causing the individual to hyper-focus on every minor coincidence: a black car passing by, a stranger wearing a dark suit, a telephone click, while entirely ignoring the thousands of mundane, non-threatening explanations for those same events. The pre-existing media myth acts as a self-fulfilling prophecy. The mind actively crafts a delusion because the cultural blueprint provides a neat, structured script where the victim plays a starring role in a cosmic conspiracy. Paranoid ideation does not always develop in isolation. Through internet forums, fringe literature, and community storytelling, subcultures build echo chambers. When an individual adopts the MIB framework, the collective mythology validates their fears, reinforcing the loop between media consumption and internal psychological manifestation. When evaluating claims of harassment, high strangeness, or encounters with mysterious operatives, scientists, psychiatrists, and neuroscientists rely on specific diagnostic and empirical frameworks to determine whether an experience is grounded in physical reality or driven by neurological psychological projection. From a psychiatric and neuropsychological perspective, distinguishing between a genuine external event and a brain-manifested delusion involves several critical markers. Hallucinations or paranoid delusions often originate from internal neurochemical imbalances, sleep paralysis, temporal lobe sensitivity, or high stress. Brain imaging, fMRI, shows that during a purely internal hallucination, the brain's sensory cortices activate from within, whereas processing a genuine external stimulus involves bottom-up sensory input from the eyes and ears. A foundational rule in both science and investigative journalism is independent corroboration. If Kenneth Arnold was followed by a car, could other neutral observers see it? Did a dashboard camera, a hotel desk clerk, or a traffic signal record the event? If an experience relies solely on the subjective internal state of the individual without a single trace of objective, third-party physical evidence, science leans toward psychological manifestation or misinterpretation. Severe trauma, lack of sleep, and chronic hypervigilance can temporarily impair the brain's reality testing mechanisms. Under extreme duress, the boundary between imagination and sensory perception blurs, causing the brain to project internal fears onto the external world, misinterpreting a standard mechanics error on a fuel valve as an orchestrated assassination attempt. Historians of science note that psychological states often mirror the technological and political anxieties of their era. During the Cold War, paranoia manifested as rogue government agents, secret surveillance, and men in black suits. In earlier centuries, the exact same psychological states manifested as encounters with demons, shadow people, or changelings. This suggests that while the internal human experience of fear and awe is real, the specific form the antagonist takes, like the Men in Black, is largely a product of media, culture, and temporal context. Preconceived information from media acts as a psychological scaffolding. When an individual experiences high stress or unexplained anomalies, the brain uses this cultural blueprint to construct a coherent narrative of paranoia and persecution, turning ordinary coincidences into a grand conspiracy. To determine where truth ends and illusion begins, science relies on objective, verifiable evidence, independent witnesses, physical traces, and consensual validation. Where those elements are absent, the shadow is revealed not as an external intruder, but as a masterpiece of the human mind reacting to the vast, terrifying unknown. Can the collective weight of a cultural myth, such as the Men in Black, trigger mass hysteria? Can someone completely uninitiated spontaneously manifest an identical delusion without ever having been exposed to the concept? Furthermore, is there scientific research exploring phenomena akin to the 100th monkey effect? These questions lead directly into the intersections of depth psychology, mass hysteria, and socio-cultural transmission theory. Strictly speaking, a specific, highly detailed cultural construct like the Men in Black, MIB, complete with dark suits, menacing demeanors, and surveillance cars, cannot be spontaneously generated in micro-detail by a mind with zero prior exposure. The human brain cannot output precise narrative artifacts, such as a modern bureaucratic government operative, without some form of sensory input, cultural osmosis, or latent media absorption. However, the emotional, thematic core behind the myth can be spontaneously generated. Long before the term Men in Black existed in 1940s pulp magazines, human beings across millennia experienced states of intense paranoia, shadow visitations, sleep paralysis entities, and nocturnal terrors. Psychologists refer to this through Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious and archetypes. While an individual may not know the explicit MIB myth, the human psyche possesses inherited structural templates for the shadow and archetypal figure representing hidden authority, unseen threat, or repressed fear. When a person enters a state of high stress, isolation, or altered neurological function, the brain reaches into this universal reservoir. It clothes the formless, instinctual terror of the shadow archetype in whatever contemporary garments are available in the cultural air, government agents, shadow people, or demons. Mass hysteria, clinically known as mass psychogenic illness or collective delusional disorder, proves how powerfully a shared idea can manifest physical and psychological symptoms across a population. When a community or subculture becomes saturated with anxiety regarding a specific threat, such as an invasion, a phantom attacker, or secret surveillance, the threshold for triggering fear responses drops dramatically in the human brain. Individuals can experience genuine physiological symptoms, racing hearts, visual misinterpretations of shadows, auditory hallucinations of clicking phones, driven entirely by the expectation of the threat. In extreme cases, multiple people in a shared environment can reinforce each other's misinterpretations, feeding a loop where an ordinary event is collectively reimagined as a conspiratorial encounter. The 100th monkey effect is a popular esoteric urban legend, popularized in the 1970s by author Lyle Watson, claiming that once a certain critical mass of a population learns a behavior or idea, it suddenly and inexplicably transmits to all related populations without physical communication. Mainstream science and behavioral biology have thoroughly discredited the literal 100th monkey effect as an exaggerated anecdote and New Age myth. Monkeys on isolated islands did not magically telepathically learn to wash sweet potatoes. The behavior spread slowly through normal observation and generational teaching. There is no empirical evidence for a telepathic field of mass consciousness that transmits complex data or specific narrative myths across human or animal populations instantaneously. While the literal 100th monkey effect is pseudoscience, mainstream behavioral science studies similar, highly documented social mechanics. In economics, sociology, and network theory, an information cascade occurs when people make decisions based on what others have done, leading to rapid, widespread adoption of an idea or belief once a threshold. Tipping point is reached within a social network. Coined by Richard Dawkins, memetics examines how ideas, behaviors, and cultural tropes replicate, mutate, and spread through human communication channels like a virus. A powerful myth like the MIB spreads not through telepathy, but through relentless cultural repetition, mass media, storytelling, and digital amplification. Biologist Rupert Sheldrake proposed the controversial theory of morphic resonance, suggesting that similar-looking or acting systems, like minds or animal groups, share a collective memory field across space and time. While embraced by fringe researchers exploring unexplained phenomena, Sheldrake's theories remain outside mainstream peer-reviewed empirical science. An individual cannot invent a specific cultural construct, like the men in black out of absolute nothingness, without some form of cultural exposure. However, the human brain can use universal archetypal fear templates to interpret stress and ambiguity. Coupled with mass social contagion, information cascades, and the omnipresence of modern media, an entire culture can so thoroughly saturate the collective environment that ordinary life events are seamlessly resculpted into grand, shared conspiracies, not through magic or telepathy, but through the deep, powerful mechanics of human psychology and narrative transmission. To be continued. Watch and listen. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full podcast now. Explore the archive Cosmic Awakening Volume 1, 1991, Peru. Journey into the Unknown. Sacred Valley of the Incas. Volume 2, Ascension 2012, The Golden Alchemy. Part 3, The First Contact, The Paranormal State. Join the journey. New episodes drop periodically. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute hit of real-life experiences, perfect for your daily plunge into consciousness exploration. Subscribe to support your inner development. Thumbs up to help push our channel through the algorithm. Comment below. Share your thoughts on today's episode.